It's not entirely, though, because the Conservatives just got out of the way that you're able to advance your agenda. It's because it looks like you got out of your own way, too.
Well,
To put it a different way, weren't you the ones obstructing, Mr. McKinnon? For months, the Liberals have tried to convince Canadians that this minority parliament is unworkable, despite them not achieving anything, and despite them prioritizing the wrong bills, and despite them poisoning legislation with the intent of framing the Conservatives as obstructionists. Now, Steve McKinnon is called out on exactly that point, and we explain how this may have been the plan all along for Carney in order to try and gain his elusive majority. Let's take a look.
Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer told CTV News this week he believes the Liberals are having conversations, quote, in good faith with his party to get legislation passed. Scheer was specifically referencing comments around what's called the Budget Implementation Act, which is a matter of confidence in the House, meaning if the bill fails, it would topple the government.
Okay, so we're stopping pretty quick, but this is extremely important in the framing of this whole thing. So, as many people have seen our coverage of Bill C-15 when it initially came out that this little section in the budget was there in order to try to give ministerial power that would allow them to make individuals or organizations immune from almost any law in Canada outside of the criminal code. And people started raising their eyebrows. Why the heck would you need that? And they tried to frame this as, oh, well, you know, it's just to get people out of the way, and it's to get legislation out of the way, and it's allowing us to move faster and all of this. But none of it was a good explanation. And Sandra Kubina and the rest of the team in the Finance Committee have been hammering the ministers hard, and we're going to get to another video probably later today or tomorrow on her and Mark Miller talking about this. But she has been pushing really, really hard against this because this is a very important clause and it would grant an enormous amount of power to ministers. So the Liberals want to try and frame opposing that, which is, you know, a good thing, as obstruction. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are trying to say, well, hold on, we need to put the brakes on this, you know, absolute power car that's been running off the road under the Liberals for the last 10 years. So this all gets framed, and thanks to Vassy for doing it, because she says Conservative leader Andrew Scheer has said he believes that the Liberals are negotiating in good faith. That's important. It's not a compliment to the Liberals. What it is it's a trap door for them. So the strategy in behind that is so that the Conservatives can say, listen, we believe they're coming to the table in good faith. So that way, if they push away, then the Liberals look like the problem. And the Conservatives, they're just saying, hey, get rid of this stupid clause or modify it to the point where it's no longer a danger. And we'll let you pass your Budget Implementation Act because we know you're not going to be able to do anything with it. Meanwhile, it seems that the pattern from the Liberals from this fall session onwards is to introduce bills in specific orders, so it causes the Conservatives to react to them in certain ways, and introduce poison pills into these bills so that they can point and wave their finger at the Conservatives and call them obstructionists. And if you don't believe me, here's them saying it themselves.
Conservative slogans, rhetoric, and obstruction don't feed Canadian families.
It's sad to see the kind of obstruction that's happening.
After several months of obstruction and delay, getting in the way of measures to improve public safety,
despite by the obstruction of the opposition.
Unless Mr. Poilievre continues with his obstruction, there's no way that that plan should not receive the approval of this Parliament. There is a majority in that room for that plan. Mr. Poilievre has to get out of the way and allow his MPs to vote on an ambitious crime-fighting agenda, to vote on a plan to grow our economy, and to vote on a plan to make life more affordable to Canadians.
So, That's over the course of months, folks. And there's many, 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 many more clips, but I didn't think all of you wanted to just hear Liberals say the word obstruction repeatedly. So this seems to be the game plan here, in that Carney and the Liberals are trying to say, all right, we're going to look bad if we continue to get floor crossers. So we're going to continue our rhetoric, our slogan, if you will, of saying that the Conservatives are nothing but obstructionists. And then we can throw our hands up and say, oh, well, see, we can't execute the mandate that the Canadian people have given us because the Conservatives won't let us. They're big bad meanies. And despite them being His Majesty's loyal opposition and their job is to literally oppose, we're going to try and paint them as, well, they shouldn't be doing that job and they should just be doing whatever Mr. Carney tells them to do. And if they don't, then you're a bad person. Again, this is the Liberal playbook. So because they're going down this path, this seems to be leading to their justification, as we may see, of them calling a spring election, which we've been hearing more and more and more and more about. So don't be surprised if at some point in the spring you hear the Liberals say, we can't continue in this. We have to serve Canadians. The Conservatives are being obstructionists. So we need a new mandate from Canadians. And he wants to go for his majority. That seems to be how this is all trying to play out. But the Conservatives have been very crafty. Remember back in C5? When C5, which was the Carney's initial bill in order to build Canada strong, and the Conservatives ripped it apart and ripped a whole bunch of issues out of that, again, by design, by the Liberals, so it could actually pass. We got a lot of heat for that. But we tried to say, listen, this is a long game. Because if the Conservatives didn't pass that, all you would be hearing from the Liberals is they're obstructionists and they won't let this pass and they're interfering in the mandate. Fast forward. What are they trying to do? Despite the fact that the Conservatives have been doing that. And that's the good thing. The good thing is that the Conservatives have allowed some of this stuff to pass so they can just hold it up in the window and say, you have no idea what you're talking about. And even Vassy Kapelos on mainstream media isn't buying what the Liberals are selling. So with all of that, let's get to Steve McKinnon.
And the last time you and I spoke, right at the outset of this sitting, Minister, you accused the Conservatives of, quote, I'm quoting here, systematic obstruction, and told them to get out of the way. Do you concede that your framing at the time has not materialized?
Well, no. In fact, I think my framing was not only pretty accurate as to what was occurring, but prescient, in as much as we've been able to make progress on a number of pieces of legislation, on the Carney plan to move Canada's economy forward. We've just tabled a procedural motion that will allow us to take up, when Parliament returns in a week from now, to take up the consideration of the Budget Implementation Act. We're very happy about that. Obviously, Canadians want this Parliament to work. No one sees the need for a federal election at this time. We just had one less than a year ago. People seem to have a great deal of confidence in the Prime Minister, in the plans that we're proposing to build Canada's economy, to build more homes, to get people to work. Those plans are bearing fruit right now, and we want that momentum to continue.
So even Vassy, you can see the head tilt. Okay, so you said that they were systemically obstructing Parliament. Don't you agree that that wasn't accurate? Oh no, I completely agree. Despite the fact that and then we're able to get a bunch of things passed. This is the double-think garbage that is coming out of the Liberals. Yes, they're obstructionists. Yes, we were able to get things passed. Well, it's one or the other. How are you obstructing if things are passing? And the Conservatives have pointed the finger back at the Liberals, especially when it comes to justice, for self-obstructing. Because remember I said that they've introduced bills in certain orders. So they put Bill C9 ahead. That's the Religious Freedoms Act, or the Religious Freedom censorship law that is coming under fire. And they wanted to prioritize that over C14, which was to reform bail, which would, if you believe the Liberals, it would stop Canadians from being subjected to all kinds of terror in this country due to repeat violent offenders when they're let out on bail. So they kept obstructing. The Conservatives trying to say, let's talk about C14. We'll get back to this. Let's talk about C14. You've waited on this for almost a year. How many more people have been affected by these repeat violent offenders? How many people have died? How many families have suffered as a result of that? And this has been the question. So then, at the end of that answer, Steve McKinnon says, oh, well, our plan is bearing fruit. I'm sorry, what? What the data says is that the economy is getting worse. It's not getting better. And less people are employed. More people are hopeless in terms of looking for jobs. So they're not looking for jobs anymore. Right? So even when the last month's job report came out and said, yeah, not very good, guys, they're still trying to say, yeah, but everything's great. This is the level of gaslighting that is going on.
It's not entirely, though, because the Conservatives just got out of the way that you're able to advance your agenda. It's because parts of that agenda, including on the budget implementation bill that previously your government had signaled you would not waver on, you now appear to be open to moving on. For example, the most controversial clause in the budget implementation bill that Minister Champagne this week said around granting extra powers to ministers was up for discussion. So it looks like you got out of your own way, too.
Well, this is a very, very important piece of legislation. It implements literally hundreds of measures that were contained in the budget and critical elements of the Prime Minister's plan to rebuild our economy. The Conservatives have expressed discomfort with one section of that bill relating to a deregulatory measure. They usually are for cutting red tape, but in this case have expressed some discomfort and asked us if we could circumscribe those measures somewhat. We're talking to them about doing that, and hopefully we can come to an agreement. But in the main, this, if it helps move a very, very important piece of legislation that will get help to Canadians and build our economy, then as I've always said, we're all ears when it comes to productive proposals from the opposition.
To be clear, maybe not yourself, but I do remember interviewing many other ministers whom I flagged this one clause with, and there was not the same openness that you're describing now to acquiescing to the Conservatives' concern on it. The bill itself, I wonder if you have any regrets about putting so much in it, right? I remember, and I'm sure you remember, a time when the Liberals, I think it was even part of your 2015 platform, were very against the type of omnibus bill that former Prime Minister Harper used to use. You're now introducing one that's 600 pages in the Budget Implementation Act. The Senate had to break it into 10 parts to study. Do you regret doing that?
Well, the Senate didn't have to break it into 10 parts to study it. The Senate chose to break it into 10
because
parts
it's so
to study
much.
it. Just for the record, here the Finance Committee and several other committees, of course, take up various divisions of this bill, but this is an important piece of legislation that implements the Carney Plan, the Prime Minister's plan to get big things built, to move forward on making Canada an energy superpower, at diversifying our exports, at getting homes built at record speed. This bill is a very, very comprehensive piece of economic legislation that will make life better for Canadians and that will yield results right from the get-go. So no, we have no regrets at all about all of the measures contained in that bill. We think they are all necessary, and we look forward to putting them into play.
Isn't that interesting? Didn't you get out of your own way? And to put it a different way, weren't you the ones obstructing, Mr. McKinnon? And then he goes on to essentially say, well, you know, because they have to try and appear collaborative, right? That's the trick here. That's where they're bending over backwards and twisting themselves into a pretzel here. So he gives an answer that tries to say, well, you know, we're always open to that. We're always open to that. And then Vassy says, you're not always open to that because just about everybody else I spoke to said that they weren't open to that. Oh, well. No real good answer, just word salad. And then she hits him again with, this is a huge bill. You used to criticize the Harper government and the Conservatives for these large bills, and you put one that's 600 pages. The Senate had to chop it up in order to actually study it. Well, they didn't have to do that. They chose to do. Okay, Steve, whatever you say, but you can see this playing out. And when you have the framing that I talked about earlier, in my opinion, this looks extremely clear as to what the agenda has been for the Liberals. And Steve even says, well, you know, nobody wants an election. So they're trying to say, we don't want an election, but we may be forced to have one. That's the piece that they don't actually say, but is implied that Canadians are hearing. So, again, good on Vassy for calling out the BS.